We've still got a lot of different thoughts and opinions about the Duke men's basketball victory over Louisville earlier in the week. Did we actually learn anything about Duke basketball? Are they back on track? Let's discuss that on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you for being here with us today on Thursday, January 25th, 2024. Excited to discuss everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. We've got a big-time focus on Duke men's basketball in the heart of the season right now as we're learning more and more about this Duke team each and every game. Earlier this week, Duke back in the win column after defeating Louisville. We'll have more conversation about that game in particular with our good friend Josh Cox from the Section 17 podcast, who joins us here in just a little bit. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Watch our show on YouTube each and every day. Hit that subscribe button, like this video, share it with your friends. Really do appreciate your support. Thank you for being an everydayer here on the program and making Locked On Blue Devils your first listen or first watch each and every day. So without further ado, excited to bring him on in. He's back. It's our good friend Josh Cox joining us here on the show today. Josh, how are you?
Doing great, JJ. Thanks for having me on, man.
Absolutely. Excited to have you back here with us. Excited to talk a little bit about Duke basketball and how they've been playing as of late. A loss over the weekend to Pittsburgh for the Blue Devils, but then they were able to bounce back on Tuesday night at Louisville. What's this week kind of been like for you watching this Duke team? And, you know, we're very reactive to games as they come and go. So what have your thoughts been over the last few?
Yeah, well, certainly. So I was in Cameron for the Pitt game, and, you know, just an odd game. Obviously, the injuries, you know, mattered. And I think that's the big takeaway for me from the Louisville game is that, yeah, the Pittsburgh game, if either Mark Mitchell or Jeremy Roach play in that game, Duke wins that game by 10 points. And so, you know, I know that you don't want to lose a game in January, especially at home, especially to a team like Pitt. But there was a lot going, you know, their way. You know, Henson literally could not miss. And I know you've talked about this earlier this week on your show, but yeah, so that was the perfect storm. So, yeah, the Louisville bounce back. I mean, certainly you wish that you beat a team like Louisville, you know, by more handily, right, by 30 points or whatever. But, I mean, Duke got the lead, held the lead. Louisville made a little bit of a run in the second half. Duke pushed the lead back out. Mark Mitchell showed in this game just how valuable he is to this team. Another double-double for him, 20 points, 12 rebounds. And, yeah, I mean, Duke took care of business. And like we've said, JJ, multiple times already on this show, at least you and I have, any road win in the ACC, I don't care if it's Louisville, any road win, you've got to walk out of there saying, okay, good, we won on the road in the ACC. And so you've got to take that and be happy with it.
Yeah, winning on the road is really hard in college basketball. We remind folks of that throughout the course of the week. You know, we saw earlier this week a school like Kentucky go on the road to play South Carolina. They lose last night. Top 10 Auburn goes on the road to Alabama, and they lose to the Tide in Tuscaloosa. So anytime you get an opportunity to win a conference game on the road, you certainly cherish that, and Duke did that earlier in the week against Louisville. The injuries are such a big piece of the conversation we've been having in regards to Duke basketball over the last few weeks, and we saw Mark Mitchell come back after missing not one but 2 games, 20 points, 12 rebounds. What did you see out of Mitchell?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, he was in the right place at the right time. I mean, he was getting easy buckets, you know, and I don't know if you want to attribute that to, you know, great offensive scheme by Coach Shire and the coaching staff, or if you want to attribute that to a subpar defensive effort from Louisville. But either way, you'll take it, right? So Mitchell got easy buckets, excuse me, dunks. Those he gets that kind of mid post, and he can really work. He got all those looks, and so to me, with Mark, the key is getting on the offensive end is when he gets the ball in positions that he personally can score in. That's where he has good games. When he gets the ball out of position or where it's not in the flow for him, he's going to struggle. But I thought Duke did a really good job of getting him where he needed to be so that he can be as successful as possible.
Yeah, we saw Mitchell not force any crazy three-point shots or anything like that. Goes 8 of 11 from the floor, gets a dunk on the very first possession of the game, and you're kind of curious how the knee's going to hold up. Well, that's a pretty good way to start when you're coming off of an injury to be explosive like that right out of the gates. And then on the defensive end of the floor, he means so much to Duke. Sometimes it's other guys that have the big stats in terms of steals or blocks that you really see, but my goodness, what Mark Mitchell brings on the defensive end of the floor is just so undervalued, so useful for this Duke basketball team, and they're just simply better when he's out there.
So 2 things with that. You're exactly right. 1 second. There we go. I attribute it to this. When you have a lockdown cornerback in the NFL, he may not have all the pass breakups and he may not have all the interceptions, and you don't want to know why? Because they're not throwing the ball that way, right? And what he does is he allows his teammates to be able to play defense a certain way. I look at it the same way with Mark Mitchell. Mark may not have all of the gaudy defensive stats, even though he does have good defensive stats. But what he allows is he allows those guards to pressure even more on the perimeter. He lets Flip guard a little bit more on the perimeter, which I think Flip is a better perimeter defender than he is low post defender. He allows Flip to get out there. And so the intangibles on defense that Mark brings to this team, I mean, they're incredible. And I believe, you can see it in the numbers. There's just a much better defensive team when he's on the court. And like I said, it might not show up in the steals and all those like counting stats that are easy to see. But when you start looking advanced and you really start watching the game and how Duke plays defense when he's on the court, it's night and day. And so he's extremely valuable to Duke. And he struggled, admittedly. I was a little frustrated with Mark probably throughout the month of November, early December. But he hit his stride. He's coming around, and he is extremely – this team will not maximize his potential without Mark Mitchell.
Speaking of injuries, we saw Jeremy Roach come back from one and then got hobbled, and instead of the knee, it's now the ankle. That's the topic of conversation in that Louisville game. Let's dive a little deeper with Roach and what that could possibly mean for Duke after we take our first time out here on this episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Enjoy your ride or die and keep it alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Once again, eBay Motors, a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Moving it forward here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, JJ Jackson alongside Josh Cox from Duke Football Talks Section 17 podcast. All right, let's talk about Jeremy Roach now. Jeremy Roach only misses one game compared to the two that Mark Mitchell had missed. He did not play in Saturday's game against Pitt, does come back against Louisville, gets the start, off to a pretty good start offensively for Duke, gets up to 10 points, so back in the double figures category, but then injures his ankle, comes back out to play early in the second half, and ultimately just cannot go. Finishes with just 17 minutes out on the floor. It's just tough when you see guys that have been out for an injury come back and just can't quite get right and get back over it. And Jeremy Roach, Josh, as we well know, another one of those guys that Duke is really going to need to step up.
I'm muted. There we go. He's so valuable to this team as a senior guard. I mean, those possessions, if you think back to the Pitt game, there were 5 or 6 possessions in the second half where you're like, this is a Jeremy Roach possession. You get Jeremy Roach and Flip in a 2-man game on the side there, and he's going to make the right decision. And so Duke missed him in the Pitt game. Obviously, with the re-injury, didn't look like it was related, per se, which I guess is a good thing. But if you remember back to last year, Jeremy injured his toe, and he never did get it right. He never did rest it properly, and you could always see him kind of favoring that foot throughout the rest of the season. I really hope that Coach Shire and Jose and the rest of the crew will make sure Jeremy's right. I would rather, Jeremy sit out 3-4 games in January, and be right for March than for him to play the rest of the season at like 80%. So, I'm not a doctor. I have no idea, but I know this. I know Jeremy's going to want to play no matter what, but I would just love to see them make sure he gets back to 100% because we're going to need 100% of Jeremy Roach in March. And so, like I said, I don't know what they're going to do with that, but I mean, it was unfortunate. And like you said, he tried to play. So that does tell you that there's probably not anything structurally wrong with the foot or the ankle. But I would like to see him be pain-free before he comes back.
Yeah, and so we'll see what happens on Saturday against Clemson, a team that's had an up-and-down year, and we're going to continue to preview the Tigers a little bit as we go throughout the season. I do want to talk a little bit more about some of the positive takeaways that we had from Duke getting back in the win column and in the games to come over this next stretch of games. We've talked a lot about how Duke starts these games being kind of something that needs to definitely improve, and that was something that did improve against Louisville. There's a lot of conversation out there on social media in regards to the Duke basketball team with some frustrations in how Duke played in that second half, but not enough conversation about the first half of play in which Duke scored 45 points. Only 2 times in in conference play this season has Duke scored over 40 points in the first half. The win over Pitt, they scored 48. Earlier this week, they scored 45 against Louisville. And the reason that's so important is because in that second half, when Duke wasn't playing as well, they were still fine in a way because they had built that cushion in the first half. And that's exactly what you do when you're able to get off to a better start. It's a 40-minute game, and too many times we kind of focus on the last little things that we've been seeing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Pitt game that they lose in Cameron, Pitt begins the game 9-0. So obviously that's not a recipe for success. And so, sure, it's a 40-minute game, but you're exactly right. It's nice to not find yourself in a hole, you're right, to start the game out. And so I agree with you. Duke did a great job of that at Louisville. A little bit of a shift in the starting lineup for that game. Caleb Foster starting, Tyrese Proctor not starting. Not sure what that specifically was about, but maybe a little bit of a message to Tyrese Proctor. By the way, we've been talking now for almost 15 minutes, and we've not mentioned the incredible game that Tyrese Proctor had. I'm sure we'll get there in a second. But yeah, I think it's important for Duke to get off to a fast start. And then I would like to see, the first 4 minutes of the second half. To me, that's where a game like this Louisville game, that's where you're up 11, I think, at halftime or whatever you're up. That's where at that first timeout, you'd like to be up 15 plus. You'd like to push that lead, because then I feel like if you're up 15 plus, you're kind of breaking their will and their back. Instead, they cut it to single digits. They cut it down to, I believe, 5 points at one point, and it just, they were back in the game. And so, yeah, I think it's important for Coach Shire and the staff to really get these guys not only starting the first half well, but the second half, especially when you have a lead. Go ahead and get those guys to where they feel like the lead's insurmountable, and they're playing, catch up the rest of the game.
All in all, a good first half for the Duke basketball team, and they were able to build on that in the second half, knowing that they had a little bit of cushion, like we said earlier, something we just had not seen so far this season. Another thing that we had discussed in regards to that Louisville game in particular was a little bit of the effort that we saw on the defensive end of the floor from the Duke basketball team. What did you make of that? What did you make of Duke's performance on defense, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, so candidly speaking here, missed shots by your opponent make you look better on defense. So I've got to be fair and say there was a lot of missed shots by Louisville. They're not a good basketball team. I'm not sure how Kenny Payne is still employed. It's rough. It's rough. But Duke did play good defense. They hawked the ball. Obviously having Mark Mitchell back, as we talked about earlier in the show, is a major key for the Duke defense. And so, I believe this backcourt can defend anybody in the country when they're on their game, when they're doing what they're supposed to do. I believe Duke can force what we have. I think 10 forced turnovers, which is not a ton, but probably could have forced more turnovers. But at the end of the day, defense did what it had to do. And held down a bad Louisville team and made them look bad, right? That's what you're supposed to do.
Speak to this, Josh, because I think when you look at the second half of play for Duke in particular, out of the gates, I think that the referees and the whistle had an impact on Duke. And again, as I said yesterday on the program, as I said this week when I joined the DBR guys on their podcast, it's not that these were bad calls by any means whatsoever. I'm not arguing that. I don't want to turn this into, oh my gosh, the refs are so horrible. But when you look at the numbers, that's the second most fouls that Duke committed in the entire season. They committed 22 fouls against the Cardinals. 24 against Arkansas was the most. 24 free throw attempts for Louisville was the second most that Duke gave up in the season. Mm-hmm. 30 against Arkansas was the most in that regard. There were only 5 free throws attempted by Louisville in that first half compared to 19 in the second half. And you think about their freshman guard in Tyler Johnson or the sophomore in Mike James. Both of those guys had more attempts from the line in the second half. Mike James himself drew 7 fouls on the Duke basketball team. And I thought that just kind of watching it changed the mentality of Duke on the defensive end of the floor. They weren't as confident, I don't think. And that was, you don't really notice that, I believe, because, hey, as Brendan Marks has told us before, as Connor O'Neill has mentioned in the past, you've brought this up a little. Duke's been a pretty good team nationally in terms of not committing fouls and just getting after you on the defensive end. And that did not happen earlier this week.
Yeah, and if we were just taking the Arkansas game, you mentioned that game, and we were going to isolate that game, I would have an answer for you, right? And my answer would be that when Duke plays a very, very physical team and they try to match the physicality, Duke is not necessarily a physical team. And when you're not used to playing that way, your fouls are a little bit more obvious. You don't know how to really be physical and get away with it. But I don't have that excuse for the Louisville game because Louisville's not necessarily, that football bullish Tennessee volunteer, type basketball team that's just going to, push you around and dare the refs to call every foul. And the refs aren't going to do that. So I don't really have an answer for that for the Louisville game as to why that happened. I will tell you this, and I know Coach Shire, I'm close enough to the action in Cameron to know that he is on this. But the amount of contact that our bigs, and I will say our bigs, it's obviously mostly Kyle Filipowski. So let's use Kyle. The amount of contact that is allowed against Kyle Filipowski when Duke has the ball. I mean, he gets absolutely hammered, like shoved around, hitting his head, hacked. And then the amount on the other end of the court, like he can brush up against a guy in like a ball screen situation. And it's like, whistle. And like that's just something Kyle's got to get better at. It's also something, in my opinion, the officials have to get better at. It is just the consistency there, right? And certainly if you're Filipowski, you don't want to be out there past the 3-point line, riding a guard into the sideline and getting a foul called. That's your fault. You shouldn't do that. But like Duke's just got to learn. I guess there's just an innate ability there of playing through contact, of being able to get away with contact on the defensive side of the ball. And it's just very obvious to me when Duke fouls. I mean, Mark Mitchell is an obvious fouler. Kyle Filipowski's an obvious fouler. And it's like the teams we play against, man, for some reason they're more subtle. And like they can be more physical. They can shove us around a little bit more. And it's not so obvious. And they don't get the fouls called. On the other end, it's like literally we shove somebody, going for a rebound or whatever it is. So I don't know the answer to that question, JJ, other than like Duke needs to get better at like physical basketball that does not involve obvious foul.
And we'll see how they can do that because, I mean, there's a level of physicality that comes with deeper in the season, right? There's going to be a level of physicality in your bigger games upcoming. Like, man, already thinking about that UNC game and what we're going to see. Last year's NCAA tournament game against Tennessee, the level of physicality clearly had an impact on the Duke basketball team. So that's something to
take it back real quick. And I know comparing to a national championship team is unfair, but like if you go back to the 2015 team, they struggled to find their defensive identity, right? All throughout the season. They finally find it by crunch time, right? By March. But that team turned into a team that can be very physical, but not like blatantly physical. And they were able to match physicality with really good teams, Wisconsin being a very physical team that they ended up beating for the championship. But like that's a great example of what I would love for this team to find out or figure out is like what's their identity on defense, and then how can we be as physical as possible inside of that identity without picking up foul after foul after foul. And that's easier said than done.
It is. And we'll see how Duke can move and adjust going forward. Clemson coming up on Saturday. We'll talk about that. And we got to talk about the Aussie. We got to talk about Tyrese Proctor and what he's been doing for the Duke basketball team. And we'll do that after one more timeout here on today's program. Got to tell you about our friends here on the Locked On Podcast Network over at Locked On Sports Today. You see, our company Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you, covering 24/7 the top sports stories of the day with our local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. So go ahead and go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. After this show ends today, make sure you go check out Locked On College Basketball. Our friends Isaac Shaden, Andy Patton do a remarkable job taking you across the league, discussing everything going on in the world of college basketball. Great conversations each and every week. Make that your second listen today. Go check them out. Locked On College Basketball. All right, let's close down today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. I'm JJ Jackson, alongside my pal Josh Cox from Duke Football Talks Section 17 podcast. I turn it back over to you, Josh, now. If you will, please promote all the great work that you've got going on these days. Where can people find you, and what are you talking about? You're muted.
Sorry, JJ. I usually let you do that for me, man. I'm sorry.
The commercial breaks get to you. It's all good.
Epic fail on my end. This is not JJ's fault. No, so it's basketball season. So I am covering basketball for Duke Report. So at Duke Report on Twitter, Freddie Hodges so kind to let me be a part of that during basketball season. During football season, we have Duke Football Talk, the Section 17 podcast. We'll be doing some off-season content. We've got some really cool things, JJ, planned for YouTube during the off-season. We're going to do some I won't tease it too much, but we're going to have some YouTube content that's going to allow Duke fans access inside of the Duke football program like they've never had before. Let's put it that way. So we're going to do some of that in the offseason. But you can find all of my basketball work at Duke Report, all the football work at Duke FB Talk, and then my personal Twitter is at Joshua Cox, and I try to keep it lively and cover all things Duke. So that's what you can expect.
Yeah, go check it all out. All right, so here we are talking about Duke basketball. Big game coming up on Saturday at home against Clemson, and Duke's got to be feeling a little bit better because their point guard, Tyrese Proctor, is coming off a career-high game earlier this week.
Yeah, I mean, it was the John Shire wake-up call maybe. I don't know what it was, but it was Tyrese did not look like himself. He was I feel he was deferring to Caleb Foster a little bit too much on even the running of the offense and the ball handling. Duke is at its best when Tyrese Proctor has the ball in his hands. And I appreciate Caleb Foster and all he brings to the table. He's an incredibly, valuable asset to this team. But Tyrese Proctor is the point guard. Tyrese Proctor is this is his team. And so he's a captain, the whole deal. And so I think Coach Shire was trying to, wake him up a little bit. And it worked because there were a couple of plays, JJ. I mean, obviously the favorite one that's going around Twitter is when, forget who the defender was for Louisville, but it's Tyrese on a clear out and that guy's clapping, real loud, like ready to defend. And Tyrese just shakes him and hits a step back three. You know what I mean? Like that's an NBA move. And so what we saw in the Louisville game was NBA ready Tyrese Proctor. And we had not seen NBA ready Tyrese Proctor for the last, since he sat out with his injury. We really hadn't seen NBA ready Tyrese Proctor. And so we saw him, and man, when he is playing and he's hitting shots like that, it's pretty incredible.
All right, so now Duke gets set to take on Clemson this weekend, and we don't know, again, the status of Jeremy Roach quite yet, his availability for this Duke team. So it's going to be important for Proctor to build off the performance that he just had. Clemson has not had a game this week. So like Duke last week, not having a midweek game, that's been Clemson's week going into this matchup here with the Duke Blue Devils. They were last seen on Saturday defeating Florida State on the road, but they've already lost some ACC games to the likes of Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, and Miami. So we will see Clemson at home coming up on Saturday. What are you thinking, or what are you watching for, I should say, from the Duke perspective?
I mean, PJ Hall is the beginning and end of Clemson basketball, and he's a great player, big guy, can score in multiple ways, pretty physical. I will be watching closely how Duke defends PJ Hall. Who's the primary defender? Do they bring help when he gets the ball in the post? But like I said, he can score from all over the court. And so he's averaging just under 20 points a game this season. And so that's where I'm going to begin. Focus on PJ Hall. How does Duke defend him? How does Clemson then counteract that? What do we do there? And then, you have the transfer in Girard who can shoot the ball. Duke's played him. Duke's familiar with his game.
Yeah. Joe Girard, that is from Syracuse now playing for Clemson.
Yeah. So, I mean, I those two guys steer the ship for Clemson. And so, I mean, not that there's not talent remaining on that team. There definitely is. But, I want to see that. Is Kyle Filipowski going to be matched up on PJ Hall? Or will they let Mark Mitchell, match up against him and let Kyle kind of, roam a little bit? Is this a game where, we saw Sean Stewart get some extended minutes in the Louisville game, which Duke Twitter, of course, loves.
Yeah.
He's like the Duke Twitter, favorite there. Will we see a little bit more of him and give him a shot on him? You've got Ryan Young that can, he's got 5 fouls and he's a smart defender. He lacks the athletic ability. Duke can throw multiple looks at PJ Hall. It's just going to be a matter of who's the primary defender, and then what does Duke do when he gets the ball? Do they send a top down double? Do they bring a double from the baseline? How do they do that? Or do they let him man up and see? Yeah. And there's definitely the thought process of PJ's going to get his. Let's not let anybody else beat us. And I understand that as well. And so I'll be very interested to see. I think Jay Lucas, really does a lot of the defensive planning and scheming. I'll be interested to see what he has in store for PJ Hall specifically.
Well, we're excited to watch it all. And, of course, we'll be talking with you about this again next week, Josh. Hopefully we're talking about a couple of Duke wins. And next week, this time, we're really ramping up for a massive one as Duke gets set to take on North Carolina. The fun ones are coming up, man.
They are. I will be in Chapel Hill for that game. I will be covering that game for Duke Report in the Dean Dome, and so that'll be a first for me. Never been to a Duke Carolina game there, and obviously never covered it for media. And so it's going to be interesting.
Can't wait. It's going to be awesome. Well, Josh,
hey, don't forget, JJ, football schedule released. Duke football fans, go ahead and put it in your calendar. All those home games, if you're local, make sure you get those marked down so there's no weddings, nothing silly. Tell all your friends that are that are about to get engaged, you got to push that stuff to back into the spring of next year, or go ahead and get it done this summer, whatever you got to do there.
Yeah.
Know?
Here we are up against the buzzer, but you're right. The schedule is out now for 2024. It's a schedule that features SMU, Stanford, and Cal all being a part of the ACC, and exciting things there. And once again, Duke and UNC is not on the final weekend of the schedule, which I can't get over. I don't understand why that's the case, Josh.
You know what? I'll give you my quick, and I know we're done.
Yeah.
Both teams both Duke and UNC have pretty favorable non-cons first 4 games of the season, and that game is the first ACC game for both teams. Should be 2 teams that are 4-0. That'll be fun. It'll be bragging rights. One team will have a loss after that, and so I'm okay with it. If it's not going to be at the end of the season, I kind of like where it's at, because both teams will be riding high, and that atmosphere at Wallace Wade will be
ready to go. That's for sure. All right, we'll see you soon, Josh. Thanks for being here.
Have a great week, JJ. We'll see you later, man.
That's Josh Cox from Duke Football Talk Section 17 podcast. Go check out his work over there. And again, he talked about the Duke Report. Make sure you check out what he's doing over there with Freddie Hodges. Awesome stuff, as always. All right, that does it for our show here today. Coming up tomorrow, Isaac Trotter, college basketball, National Insider, 247 Sports. It's been a few weeks since he's been on the program. What is he seeing from this Duke team? We find out coming up on tomorrow's episode of the program. That'll do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.